Now we are talking about different modes of analysis. If you have the timeline here, and we are here today, we call this AD 0, that's what we use, analysis state 0. So we are here today. We have the following modes. Here at this point in time, we do the actual calculation of the actual situation, or you could also call it end of day calculation. That's often called at the bank. So at the end of the day, you have an exact position. You calculate what you have, where you are. We call that internally also canonical. What does canonical stand for? Canonical means the thing which we believe to be true. So we are at the end of the day, we know all our positions, we know all market parameters like yield curves, FX rates, we feed those into the system, we draw a book from it, and we see how rich or poor we are, given all that information. So that's why we call it canonical, or you can also consider it end of day. So that is a snapshot of now. So that is the first analysis what we do. Then we can, at the same time, end of day, we can make already little types of analysis where we say what would happen if the yield curve or the FX rate or another market condition would not be as it is, as we observe it, but if it would be different, if there would be a shock and interest rates would change, or FX rate or stock markets would change. How would that affect my bank or my institution today? So at the same time here, this is now a symbol for a shock. Let's say we have an interest rate. Let's assume we have an interest rate shock. So we have here term to maturity, and here we have the rate. And this is the rate interest yield curve. So short-term rates are normally lower than long-term rates. So this is the observed one. This is used for the canonical. But at the same time, we can shift around the yield curve. We can say what happens if the yield curve is like that or like that, and how does that affect my actual position. And this one we call then static what if. Okay. If we flip around this yield curve, not only once or twice or thrice, but we flip it out very often and somehow systematically computed by a program which includes some consistency considerations. So we have many new different states under which we recalculate the wealth of the end of day. So then we would have static Monte Carlo. The technique to generate a lot of scenarios and then recalculating everything, this is called the Monte Carlo technique. So these are static analysis, or canonical, static what if, and static Monte Carlo. Why we call it static, I will explain afterwards. Then if we go from here into the future, so we make a forecast, a budget, how will my income be affected by different market factors, so we would then generate now not changes here, but we would generate changes over time, like this. Something like that. So this we then call dynamic. What if? It is what if because we generate a few parts, few well-selected parts. If we do that not only a few times, but again compute those with computer algorithms, let's maybe take that off, and we do now not just 3 scenarios, but the computer generates many here. And then we calculate what happens to the bank. So then we call that dynamic Monte Carlo. Finally, if we calculate every day what is our state, so we know the state every day, the next day we will also know it, and we knew it every day before. So we did a canonical every day or an end of day calculation every day. So then we get, basically for free, we get what we would call a historic. So where we can do historic analysis, we can analyze what has happened. So the historic, of course, is only one part. So there are no alternative histories known to us, at least not now. So these are the modes of calculation. So we have the static, as a special case the canonical, then static what if and static Monte Carlo, then we have the dynamic what if, dynamic Monte Carlo, and the historic. Okay, so now I will explain static versus dynamic. Okay, so we are here on the timeline. We have AD0 like before here, and now we can draw a line like that, and assume now on top we have piled up all the assets which we have, one on top of the other. Maybe let's do it like this. So maybe we have so much assets. Okay. On the other side, we have all our liabilities, and if we include the equity, it should be the same size here. So, and we have a runoff of our business. Let's draw it like this. And we have another runoff, maybe something like that, on the liability side. What does it mean? This means of all our business, we have so much which matures in this time here. That's the time. So let's say this is 1 month. So most, or that part of our business will mature in 1 month. This part of our business will mature in maybe 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, whatever it is here. Similar here. So the static analysis starts with that kind of data where we know all the cash flows, how does it flow off the books, and we will use at the same time here, maybe let's do it up here, we have a yield curve. I take the same example as we had before. Again, time to maturity, here the rate. So when we take all these cash flows, here you can consider them like the principal cash flows here. And we, for example, discount it using this curve here. So we discount everything back to AD0, same here. We get a certain value. Let's call it V0. Okay. So that is what we would call the canonical, what we called canonical before. We used actual market observation, we use our actual data, we discount it, we generate the value, call it V0 from AD0 here. And now if we flip that around, let's say we do now a what if, we say it will become something like that, for example, here. So we will get an alternative value. We get V1 and V2, V3, V4. So in the static analysis, we look at all the deals which exist, so and we discount it. Static, because basically we see everything from today out. It looks like we would go into the future because we look at future cash flows, but we really see it from here. So it's today's perceptions of the future cash flows. We don't really move in time. The only thing is what moves is the yield curve itself. We will talk about that yet here. So that is static analysis here. The special notion of static is that we only look at the business as we have it today, and everything matures. It's what it represents is a bank that does not go into the future. It's a bank that does no new business. It's a roll down. It's closing its door. So you could also call that liquidation view. So that's basically behind static. No new business. What would be the bank worth if we just sold it? If we let it run out? What would be at the end of the day in our cash box if that would happen? So it's a liquidation view. In dynamic, we take then a going concern view. Which means we do not let the bank shrink. Actually, we do something like, instead of shrinking, we want actually to grow. Something like that. Which means when this, first of all, we have some additional business here, but when this business is going to retire, we will substitute it. We will again give a loan. That was a loan which was retired, so we will re-implement it again. We will give another loan. Or this is a deposit which came back, and of course our hope is that we get another deposit here. And that's normally the case, save in a liquidity crisis where it will be difficult. So what we do now in dynamic analysis, we make assumptions about the future business, which means we decide here three things. First of all, volume. So how much? How much new business are we doing? That's the first thing. Then, what kind of business are we doing? For example, are we investing into 5-year loans, or are we investing in 10-year loans? Are we investing in bullets like pumps, or are we investing in amortizing annuities like mortgages, etc.? So the second part, what we have to decide is the characteristics, we call this, characteristic. So long-term, short-term, amortizing, non-amortizing, etc. And the third thing which we have to decide is we need, parallel to this, we now will do a forecast of the market conditions. Again, let's focus on the interest rate. So we are forecasting interest rates. We have the current interest rate. Let's say put that like here. And now, given the current interest rate, we forecast, let's say maybe that's forecast 1, high rates, forecast 2, low rates, forecast 3, average rates, etc. So we make different forecasts of the market condition. And since we have now, this is what we call then the pricing. So we need to forecast the yield curves. Now, here we have forecasted what kind of business we do. Let's say, when I do it in red, maybe I have to paint it over what we had here. Let's say we invested here in 5-year bonds. That would create something like that. We have invested here. So, and then in our forecast, the system will pick the 5-year rate. If it's nothing special, then it will be the 5-year rate. Let's say we are in this forecast here, so it will pick that rate and will give that specific interest rate to that contract. So which will then create interest cash flows. Now I can draw it a bit bigger here, but the size of the interest cash flow will depend on that rate. Actually, we will not only use that rate, we will add a spread, which is part of this information here, this spread, and actually it's this spread including will be used for this contract and the new contract. So when the contract will mature and then there will be new contracts here, then they will go to this yield curve, pick the corresponding rate, and it will go on and on. Once, and it fills all these gaps, on the asset side, on the liability side. It picks up the right market condition. From the market condition, it knows the condition of the contract, from where we can derive anything like a balance sheet over time. So we can draw a balance sheet at any point in time, and we can calculate the P&L at any point in time between the two. This would be a balance sheet here, a snapshot. The P&L is the change between the two balance sheets, and so we could calculate everything. We can also calculate at any point in time, again, the future cash flow, because we have all information about the business, so we know everything about that. So that is what we call dynamic what-if. Dynamic Monte Carlo is the same thing, just with a lot of scenarios and computer-generated scenarios. The reports will look a little bit different because we cannot look at hundreds of scenarios. We will look at distributions in the Monte Carlo, rather like this. So we see the distribution of income, for example, distribution of value at T1, then here we go on time, this is T2, and we see then how that distributes here. We are T3, how it distributes here, and the average and so on. So that will be Monte Carlo. But otherwise, it is the same view here. Yeah, maybe at the difference between liquidation view and going concern view. I think that's an important topic. So we have liquidation on one hand and going concern here on the other hand. Liquidation view, we said we have no new business, and actually we stay here. We don't move. So that means we are static. That's why we call it static actually. So, and now we stay here, but we still shock yield curves. Remember, we did something like that. But how much is a yield curve or any market condition factor going to change if delta t, the change of time, is 0? Actually, the movement of any market factor, if delta t is 0, also the movement is 0. It should also be 0 actually. So that means we are in a kind of contradictory world. On one hand, we say we do not move, and then still we move. Now, this is a little contradiction, something inconvenient about static analysis, but it does not devaluate it. You could consider we just make a one-day step, and the one-day step is almost like 0 step, and the analysis would work. What is maybe more concerning is the fact that liquidation view, we assume that we want to sell the bank. That is fine, but what would happen if everybody wanted to sell the bank? Or if everybody just wants to sell and nobody would be there? If this is the case, actually value would disappear. That shows that the idea of value, be it any value, market value or any book value, is actually a basis of going concern. There is only a value as long as there is somebody here to buy what I'm selling. If everybody is going to sell, so it doesn't work. So value as such is a going concern concept. But what is analyzed here is the change of value under the assumption that everybody sells. Again, a little disturbance. Of course, we do that only hypothetically. We don't really sell. We only say, if I sold, and of course, at the same time, we assume I am the only one to sell and there will be somebody out to buy. But it shows the importance of going concern. The true analysis must have a going concern view. It must assume that we go on over time and not just look at ourselves at where we are. So there in going concern we do new business, we do new market conditions. Actually we even include operational cost and other revenues which are part of the system. And this gives us actually a realistic view of the future. Now, most of the analysis which is today under the title of risk management is actually liquidation view static analysis. Most risk analysis, all value at risk analysis and so on, is a static view. Now, why is that? I think one of the things is because it is very convenient. You have to make less assumptions. If you are in the going concern world, it's in a sense a more realistic picture, but you have to make more assumptions. And of course the assumptions themselves are not really realistic. You have to assume something. So that's why, of course, you make not only one assumption, but you make multiple assumptions with what if, or many assumptions with Monte Carlo. So that's the relationship between static and dynamic analysis.